I think we are live. This was funny this morning. This is, let's see where Angela is. I tell you, it's never a dull moment. Happy New Year, Angela.
New Year. Yay.
Good morning, Angela. Nirvana out in California. You know, I was sitting there like, what is going on?
We're live. I've been seeing that we've been live for like, it's been a minute, over a
like,
minute
like, like 45 seconds. I'm looking like, what's going on?
now. Exactly.
Happy New Year, Angela.
Happy New Year. Happy New You. It feels good to be in 2020. I forgot to
Amen.
tell my audience Happy New Year. Friends of ADOS, Happy New Year. We just jumped right in, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Good morning. I think we have some people telling us good morning and happy new year. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Chicago ADOS is in the house. Good morning.
Hey.
Good morning, y'all. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Happy New Year. We're going to talk about housing,
Hi, Drew.
homelessness. Hey, Drew. Good morning. Housing and homelessness this morning. This is a subject that not too many people want to talk about, not too many people want to touch, because there's a lot of things about it that I think, Angela, we need to address, particularly
Yes.
ADOS, Angela. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. I can hear you now. Absolutely. It went out just a little bit, but I'm still here. If I look like a deer in headlights, I can't hear you.
Technology, sometimes it ain't always our friend.
Honey, but the show must go on.
Amen. Amen. She says a big issue that needs to be addressed. Thank you for bringing homelessness front and center. Angela, we talk about this all the time with the ADOS movement. How many people are living on the streets? I'm here in Atlanta, right outside the Atlanta area, and I'm gonna tell you a story. One morning, a lady knocked on my door, bamming on my door, beating on my door early one morning because there was a stray dog in my yard. And she was like frantic about this dog being in my yard, and this stray dog, and it didn't have a home, and she didn't know who it belonged to. And I just couldn't help but think about how many people are living on the streets. And not that the dog wasn't important, but how many people are living on the streets and sleeping under bridges, and how many people are homeless. And we don't give that the same kind of love and attention and demand.
Right. Absolutely. Uh, you know, there is a benign neglect amongst our people about what's really happening, the conditions on the ground, and how it's, when white folks catch a cold, Black folks catch the death of pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what's happening. We're just out here in California. It's a real horror show to see how we've become. We just looked it up statistically. I think we're a little over 9% of the population here in Southern California, but 80% of ADOS is on Skid Row. This is a national, this is a disaster. It is a crisis out here, the homelessness issue. And it needs to be addressed. We are doing the ADOS SoCal movement and the ADOS LA chapter are doing great work to fight this, because a lot of it starts with gentrification, right? Like, when you start to gentrify the communities, it is either going to drive you out because of how gentrification hikes up the rents and the housing prices in such a way that we can't even afford it. Now, you add to that the fact that we have no social capital out here. So when it was when Black was popular, you could get a job pretty readily out here in LA. But now you have to know Spanish. It's a new form of discrimination, because the trick is, even knowing Spanish, you don't have the complexion for the protection. And if you've got Hispanics and white folks in a position to hire you, they're going to hire their people. I went on an interview for a 6-figure year income on the defense side of what I currently do in workers' comp. And the lady who invited me to the interview is Hispanic. And I hadn't heard back in about a month. And when she ran into me in the court, she told me I was by far the best candidate to interview for the position, but her white supervisor wanted to continue her search. I ran into another colleague who is twice the age of her white boss. Okay. They applied for the same position. Now, my colleague, who is ADOS, had over 20 years of experience, had amassed a $200,000 a year income. They gave her position to a white gay male and told her that she could come back under a 1099 contract. She opted to go to a defense firm where she's making a fraction of what she once earned. And when the position for management in her unit came up, they gave it to the 30-something-year-old. She may be late 50s, early 60s. Okay. They gave it to her. And so now she is my friend who has more experience. This woman has an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, and a law degree. And this chick, white chick with a fraction of the experience, is her boss. Okay, this is a problem. So I'm just trying to make the case for why this is happening to us, how it's happening to us, and why we are at DEFCON 4, we are at critical mass. These things are happening to us. It starts with not being able to give work. I'll let somebody else jump in, but I've got a whole list of the reasons why we are becoming homeless in the country our ancestors built with their lives, and why at my Friends of ADOS TV channel, we are constantly making the case for reparations and dealing with these ADOS hot topics, because we all need to get involved. Tamara, I'll let somebody else chime in while I look up my notes.
Good morning, Robbie.
Good morning. Good morning.
How are you? Welcome to the broadcast.
I'm
Angela
fascinated. I'm listening to the guest. Hi. And I completely know what you're saying is 100% accurate, because people, you know, obviously I can pass even though I'm Latin, and I'm in these circles where people are discussing it, and people hire who they feel comfortable with hiring. This is the whole idea of the good old boy network in Georgia. And it's a fascinating discussion because, you know, there's certain people that think, oh, everything's fair now. Everything's equal now. We don't need reparations. We don't. But exactly what you're describing is an unspoken network that occurs to date.
Absolutely.
And it's true. I mean, it's a fact. Everybody knows that people of color are ridiculously overqualified, and, you know, they go for the same positions, and then they wonder, well, how did this person get hired? Because they feel more comfortable hiring. And this has been a practice, you know, for generations. You hired who your cousin knew. You hired who was in your family. You hired who you feel comfortable with. And we have never explored, you know, the history in this country in education. We've never discussed the reality of what's occurred. And they're not, you know, the people in authority, the people in generational historical authority who have for generations controlled these companies and so on, they don't feel comfortable with the discussions of race relations, inequity, let alone reparations.
You're absolutely right about that. The biggest challenge is we don't have any protections under the law anymore. There was a time when we could be hired because we were Black, and, you know, if you were Black and a woman, you could definitely be hired. Right. And the government was incentivizing these corporations to play fair and grant us opportunity. Right. All of that done away with. And so without that in place, it makes it practically impossible for us to be guaranteed work anymore.
Well, it's
Okay?
actually worse. It's not only that there aren't protections, we have the illusions of protection, the illusions of EEOC, the illusions of the equal opportunity protections. But really, in reality, you are, if you have an injustice having to do with race, gender, a Title VII action, your only recourse is to, after the fact, go legal, and you have to fund that. So it's an illusion of a protection, because anybody who's ever filed with the EEOC agency, the Equal Opportunity Commission, I believe, knows that they are overburdened. Like their backlog, I think 5 years. And actually,
wow.
the image that Tamara, I believe, has right now on the housing issue, which there was a comment about homelessness and veterans, and all of this is all tied together. What you're speaking about, jobs, opportunity, access, discrimination, it's all tied together. You can't get a home without credit. You can't get a home without a job. You can't get established without a home. You can't get stable without a home. So now we have the Secretary of HUD, Ben Carson, basically allowing the states to handle this. And everyone knows that that's a disaster, because, or anyone who lives outside of privilege knows that that is going to be a disaster, because when states take it upon themselves, now we're not enforcing federal policy. There was a reason we had to send in federal troops to establish equity in education. So we're going backwards now. In essence, he's saying that the states are going to handle this. Well, we can't even get a phone call back from a politician. How are the states going to handle this? They are resentful. The people in authority, who are predominantly Caucasian, are resentful of enforcement or mandation on policy of equity. So that's all this is, a retraction, and expecting anything opposite when we don't get into education, when we don't get into real discussions, like programs like this, is an exercise in futility.
Absolutely. I concur. To your earlier point about, lawsuits, the very friend I was mentioning, who is far more qualified and far more degree than her now white manager in her division at the defense firm that I was referencing earlier, 150 people were laid off when she was laid off from her $200,000 a year job. And she's ADOS, American Descendant of Slavery. I make that distinction because we've been very inconveniently lumped into a people of color category that mask our failure in the country our ancestors built with their lives. So I'm going to be referring to us not as people of color, but as American descendants of slavery, because that is our new identity. That is the way we're trying to train our entire community to get on board with that, because we're lining up for our justice claim. But anywho, out of 150 people that were laid off, 70% of them were women, and 90% of them were Black.
Wow.
And so they filed a lawsuit and lost.
Oh, yeah.
And at the same time, to appeal the case, the attorneys wanted $350,000.
Right.
So we literally are in a place where we can't even fight. We can't even afford to continue to fight to the Supreme Court level to right these injustices. And that's what they're counting on, that we can't afford it.
And even if you could, the courts are hostile. The judges are hostile to the public. They are most of the time in favor, protected, or in essence, in such an elite category that they don't know the stories of people that are beyond corporations or executives. And case law is not supportive. I mean, I've seen this thousands of times, and that's kind of why it's so important who we elect has a diverse background, because these judges are appointed and these are lifetime appointments. So in essence, without these protections, this is why unions and unions, not only in a blanket coverage, but unions specifically for groups that are at risk. And I say that in terms of women and minorities. I mean, we have companies, a perfect example in Atlanta is, and ironically, there's a lot of people out of LA or the West Coast who work for this company. It's a huge corporation in Atlanta. It's actually an airline. And they have an interesting, it's Delta, there's no reason for me not to say the name, but they have an interesting structure. Their pilots, who are predominantly white and Caucasian, are unionized, protected by contract, but their attendants, who are predominantly women, are non. And so, and then their mechanics, I believe, have protections, but then there's below wing. So there's the airport workers, the people who handle the ticketing, the people who handle the baggage. The people below wing are predominantly people of color. And so baggage handlers, people who handle security, the catering, that's actually subcontracted. And it's fascinating because it's one company, but one class is protected. So in essence, that class is paid a certain way, protected a certain way, and everyone else isn't. And it's a fascinating hierarchical structure. And Atlanta pretty much runs in a modern day good old boy network. And the example of the airport is a fascinating new example of an almost plantation-like structure.
Wow.
It brings in so much revenue, and everyone has this view of it like, oh, it's so global, it's so diverse. But when you actually know the intricacies of it, and you know that right now the attendants are suing a uniform company, Land's End, because it gave all these horrible allergic reactions. And it's not the first time it's happened, but it's ironic. Had the pilots been forced to wear uniforms that were causing medical issues, that would have never occurred for more than a day, because they are contractually protected. They have representation, but no one else except the executives, who are predominantly white and male, and the pilots have those protections at this massive corporation that's global, that claims diversity. And ironically, I believe, Tamara, didn't you have a vet, Avery, on your show who was trying to unionize below wing, and she was terminated? And to your point, she was terminated with no recourse. We're a right to work state. She can't get an attorney to handle it. EEOC is backlogged despite federal protections. And again, this goes back to allowing states, because Georgia is a right to work state. So in essence, what people do is they stay out of state to have some type of protection, but it doesn't matter because they're headquartered here.
Girl, you are blowing my mind with this information, because I love flying Delta.
I'm sorry.
I gotta rethink this, but I mean, who could I fly that isn't practicing in the same way? That's what the big question.
Well, actually, Southwest is unionized, but really, it's not anything. When we look at these scenarios, this isn't like to poo-poo on a company. There's no point in that. The point and the value is to look at the reality and say, where can we go from here? How can we improve the lives of not only these employees, but really an airline impacts, national security, public safety. When you have workforces of people who are not free to say, hey, this is unsafe. Hey, I'm getting an allergic reaction and can't do anything here. That creates a national security epidemic. And that's why it's so fascinating that Atlanta and our elected officials are so blind to what's happening at the airport. And it impacts in so many different levels, because the revenue of the airport impacts elections. The revenue of the airport impacts the state and how we fund. The revenue of the airport that is partially in Clayton County is actually minimized because the company is subsidized, and therefore Clayton County, one of our poorest counties, predominantly Black, is not receiving the revenue they need to stabilize. So it's fascinating.
Let's go back to housing and homelessness. Let's kind of bring it back, because I don't want us to get. I know we can go.
Okay, so back to housing. Clayton County is actually in the top 10% for rentals in the country right now, because all of the people in city of Atlanta that is gentrifying, to what you were discussing, are getting pushed south. They're getting displaced to Tri-Cities, Clayton County, McDonough, and Henry County, and rural Georgia. So in essence, when Atlanta is not taking care of Atlanta's own, we're pushing it to other cities and rural Georgia who are not prepared at all, because they already have their own scenarios that they're ill-equipped to handle due to lack of revenue, ironically tied back to the group. Everything is tied together. That's what, you can't, your eyes, your mouth, your arms, it's one body. That's how our systems work. These things are all tied together. And without a housing first platform, it's impossible to expect homeless people to get back on their feet. And we spend millions in the cost of homelessness because we don't spend a fraction of that helping homeless people have stable housing first policy.
Mm-hmm. And what does that look like, Robbie? What does this stable housing first policy actually look like?
Well, I mean, I don't want to monopolize. I want us to be interactive. But I have an idea of it. I don't know. I can go second, though. I'm happy to. Or
I'm asked. Go ahead, Robbie.
okay. Well, to me, people are at different levels, right? So some people don't want to live in a shelter. In fact, most of the homeless people that I've engaged with always say that the shelters are not secure. They don't feel comfortable with all the rules. Oftentimes the people who handle the shelter are affiliated with a religious organization, most of the times kind of a white savior. And they're forced, to basically they're treated like children. And nobody wants to be treated like that, not grown people. So really, in my idea, the ideal vision is this tiny house model, because you have to be able to store your items somewhere. You have to be able to sleep without fear of being beaten to death, raped as a woman, assaulted. You have to be able to lock up maybe a method of transaction, lock a bike to a tiny home, keep your items outside of shelter. We have these people under bridges because they're trying to stay out of shelter, out of the elements, out of the rain. And if you look under any of our bridges in Atlanta, they're overwrought now. So people are using urban camping, tents, tiny homes, and then non-transitional housing facilities where you can rent to share a room, and you have a shared almost boarding house. And to me, that's an ideal evolution to get people where they want to go. We've seen these articles where people were given stipends for apartments. And soon after, they lose their status because they're not equipped to handle the habits of those apartments. But if we let people go in the stages that they're equipped to when they're ready, that's ideal, because we're dealing with adults most of the time. And if it's a family, then of course, but that family should be provided a dwelling, right? And then access to support systems. Because if it's a family with children, how do we expect our children to go to school when they haven't bathed, when they don't have somewhere safe to live, when they haven't been able to eat, when their home life is in chaos? To come to school, to sit still and sit there and concentrate and learn, who can do that?
Exactly. I was looking up some statistics on the Black homelessness rate here in Los Angeles, and it's just staggering. Homelessness disproportionately affects Black people in Los Angeles, though about 9% of LA County's total population is Black identifying. Black people make up about 36% of the county's homeless population, according to the 2018 homeless count.
I believe
it is. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Representation born out of a deep history of institutionalized racism in America, and is the focus of a groundbreaking report formally released this week by the LA Homeless Services Authority. Now, this is dated back in February of this year. It's a 115-page report, the goal of which is to lay a framework for building a more equitable Los Angeles, spells out in explicit detail how institutional racism stitched into the fabric of Los Angeles criminal justice, education, and healthcare systems, as well as discrimination in the job and housing markets, conspire to force Black people to the street at a rate much higher than Angelenos of other races. Okay.
I believe it because every time I'm in the streets, I only see 10 to 15% of non-Black homeless people. 85% of the homeless people that I encounter, and I'm around them a lot because, as Tamara said, I'm in real estate. I'm constantly driving around. I'm an advocate. It's 85% Black to 90.
Right, and this is problematic. Out here, they've introduced, I think a bill was passed for rent control. But my concern is, what difference does any of it make? It goes back to my earlier point about joblessness. amongst our people. What difference does it make if you control the rents and people still can't afford to rent because they're not being hired at the same rate as Hispanic and white people in this state? Southern California in particular is where I live and where we're impacted. It doesn't matter if you're controlling rent, if it still costs me 3 times as much to get into that property. Furthermore,
you're absolutely right. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. You got scores of white homeowners and developers who don't want the rents controlled. So I'm saying that, to me, the wheels of justice move far too slow at the rate in which we're being pushed into homelessness.
You're right.
I don't think that these solutions really work. We've got to get to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is systemic racism, ongoing accrued disadvantage in the country that our ancestors built with their lives. And we are in the fight of our lives to prevent from becoming the permanent underclass. This is diabolical on so many levels. The house is not on fire. We are individually on fire.
True.
What do you think, Rabia? First of all, we need white allies. We need everybody in this fight. So I'm thankful for your presence on this live. And I don't mean to, seem like I'm discriminating, but my people are on fire, and I have to speak to those issues because, hey, if I don't ring the alarm, who else is? What do you think we can do?
100%. And please do not apologize, because anybody who is for equity, who understands any type of holistic view of the world, is not going to necessitate that apology. When we have a whole class of people, the way you're describing, as you said, at risk, on fire, that impacts all of us, whether you see it as a morality or an emotional component, or whether you see it as, I'm going to pay for this as a taxpayer 5 times unnecessarily instead of investing in people. So 100%, you're absolutely right. And the only reason the other people, people of privilege, are not as affected is because the people who are on fire aren't coming after people of privilege the way that, frankly, anyone would. Really, so I completely agree with you. I think our problem, again, is, yes, of course, people need jobs. Yes, of course, we need the elected officials to basically create regional economies through public-private partnerships. But in order to do, because the areas that are harmed, the people that are harmed, have been so divested in for so long generationally due to this quote unquote good old boy network and who they feel comfortable hiring, we are generations down the line. So we didn't get here without federal investment into white society. Therefore, we need federal investment, state investment into divested societies. The problem is the people who are predominantly in authority, that same class of elite, predominantly white society, do not understand history, and they cannot grasp the conversations of privilege, racism, white fragility. Often their responses become, that happened years ago, that has nothing to do with me, I've earned everything, I've worked hard for everything, we don't need a public-private partnership, or those people don't need assistance, y'all just need to work, and committing crime is wrong. That is their perspective, not understanding the stages throughout history, how wealth was accumulated through real estate, how redlining impacted, how when your family was afforded a home and you were able to go to college, what happened to the other groups of people that didn't get those privileges, and that they didn't continue moving up like your family did, they continued moving down. And well, and now we're in this boat where those people don't understand that because we don't teach history.
Oh, you're so right. It's so exhausting on so many levels. It just feels like a mount. It just feels like a mountain that we have to climb because, some white folks want to be educated and they are allies like yourself. but many of them don't, because to be educated means that you are participating in a system designed to keep us oppressed as a people, which means you now have to admit the reparations are old, which means you've got to give up some of your creature comforts.
But the thing is, it's a flawed premise for them to believe that, I mean, they are complicit. You're complicit until you actively are not complicit.
Right.
So, but you can choose your politics. Yes, I'm white. I'm sorry, I'm Latin. You keep saying I'm white, which is why but I'm Latin, but I can, I'm sorry.
White. So do you identify as white? Because out here, that's what a lot of the Hispanics do.
I know.
They identify as white.
They're confused. They're very confused.
Well,
So,
I mean, using their privilege. It's getting them promotion in this city.
No, it is, but they're only when they behave.
Hispanics making great strides in politics out here. The ones that look white in terms of skin color, they're making great strides in the workforce. They're becoming the managers, the people in a position to hire, and they're becoming our political officers out here. It's happening. So they're identifying as white.
Well, really what they are actors. They're actors executing an agenda that they don't understand, that the day that they are at risk or stop executing the agenda for the 1%, they're no longer going to be white to anybody. But they don't understand that right now. Hey,
Egberto. Sorry, y'all. My computer totally crashed. Egberto.
Hello.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to everybody. How y'all doing?
Is that Egberto? I can't see him, but I sure know that voice.
I am not that black now.
I see it. Is he on the screen for you?
Yeah,
I am black, but you can still see me, right? I mean, I hear you guys talking about things like white fragility and the stuff that Ta-Nehisi Coates talk about, and I'm like, I'm enjoying this, and then I'm enjoying how Ravi Kavan is saying, "Hold on, but I'm not white, Robbie, you white."
Wait a minute.
Both. Let me tell you a joke, okay? Both Robbie and I are Latino. The difference is I'm a black Latino and Robbie is a white Latina.
Exactly. I love it. Thank you for being on the live. Wow, I didn't know you were going to be on the live. This is wonderful.
Well, she told me that I was ordered to be here at 11:30 Eastern time. I follow orders very well.
I love it. Thank you for being on here. We were just talking about the exhausting topic of housing and homelessness, and how, ADOS is just, oh my God, we're taking such a hit, especially here in LA. It's just been a nightmare. And I was just tying together how we came here, how we got to this point. And I want to bring up a couple of other, what is this called? Common life events that can cause homelessness. Eviction or foreclosure.
Before you dive in, Angela, let's let Egberto give us a national update, because I know he doesn't stay with us too long. So Egberto,
she runs me off pretty quickly. So let me say my national update real quick.
No, you don't have to be that quick, but I know there's some stuff we need to know real quick.
Well, as you know, first of all, Donald, I don't like talking about Donald Trump, because I really want to be talking about that which is going to make us better, the things that handle the middle class, things that are dealing with people of color that have to be taken care of. And anytime we are starting to talk about Iran, or anytime we start to talk about all these other issues, your issue, ADOS, go under the rug. All the issues that matter to people go under the rug. So I don't like to spend too much time on that. But in this one, I think I must, because it will affect all of us in the long run. As you know, Donald Trump went ahead and killed effectively what would have been our Secretary of State or our Secretary of Defense, one of those high offices. He just went ahead and killed the guy. This guy could have been killed by any one of the administrations years ago, but they decided that it would be too disruptive to do that. How does that affect us as regular people? If it were only the military to worry about, it would be one thing. But that action that Trump did puts everybody going on an airplane or leaving the country or sitting in not only Saudi Arabia or England or whatever. Every American right now is a target. So I think all Americans have to realize that, you know, while you can start singing glory, glory, hallelujah, we killed the killer, glory, glory, hallelujah, in killing that one killer, we may have killed a lot of Americans. It's the same thing that occurred when Bush invaded Panama. What occurred is, yes, they got their man, but in the process, 10,000 Panamanians got killed. So sometimes the end does not justify the means. Now, on a local national front, all right, the election season is now in vogue. The question is, what's the approach that we're going to take? I know Tamara is a progressive, and I kind of have a feeling that most people on this show right now are progressives. We have a lot of work to do. I'm writing a blog this morning with a conversation I had with an evangelical. I can't tell you how sad it was. I know Tamara is a Christian, and she understands why you give the smirk.
Because I don't know where that is going.
It's going into a good place. It's going into a very good place. Tamara is a Christian, and I had this long conversation with an evangelical woman. And the one thing that sort of touched me was when she said, Donald Trump is president, and pretty much God is the one who put him there. I asked her a question, is you mean that was the best Christian God could find? But, you know, well,
I think, you know, from her perspective, she might believe he is the man and he's God's chosen man for this. But yes. I think this is my perspective, and it's just my personal perspective. I think Donald Trump is, I believe God put him there, but I don't think God put him there for the purpose that people on these evangelicals think. I don't think that. I think that he's being used to do. Look, we have this new ADOS movement. We have, you know, we're now more politically engaged than ever. So I think he's a bad man being used for good.
Okay. All right. Oh my God.
Okay, let Angela chime in because she's a believer as well. Angela.
Angela.
I believe, now see, I am a metaphysician, okay? As a New Thought Christian, I believe that we are made in the image and after the likeness of God. So you are the face of God, and you are the face of God, and Robbie is the face of God. Like, I believe that, you know, God is within each and every one of us, and it is up to us to invoke that and to understand our divinity from that perspective and be about collective upliftment. I believe that man put Donald Trump into office, and that's what folks chose to do because they've got free will. That's kind of like how I size that up.
Robbie, what you think?
Every one of us, but women in far too many right now, and it's our job for those of us that are awakened to the inner Christ to be about this work and to make it happen.
What you think, Robbie?
I agree altogether with all the statements that were made. I mean, not the woman who's, I mean, that is her existence. That is her reality. That's what she believes. So we have to deal with that because ultimately we all live here, right? We all drink the same water to some degree. We're not all affected on the same level, but we are to a degree, to a level. The reason difficulty doesn't upset me as much, even though it does, it's just that, for example, Trump, these occurrences with Trump and everything that he's doing are really shedding light on the health of our country, on where we are, you know, soul-wise, you know, what people really think. I mean, he was voted in, regardless of scams and whatever, he was. People love him. So we have to recognize this as a reality. It's almost like being in a relationship with someone and you're in denial. You know, I'm serious. We can no longer afford to be in denial about the reality of where we're at. A lot of Americans love him. A lot of Americans believe in what he's saying. He is resonating with a lot of Americans. What does that tell us? And we need that information to know where to go. I'm so happy Victoria's here because the rent control issue you brought up, this woman is living through it.
Okay, we'll come back to that in just a second. But Victoria, welcome to the broadcast. And I know Egberto has to go, but since you opened the door to this question, Victoria, do you want to chime in on what you believe who Trump is? Can she
Okay,
hear
I'm
us?
having some audio problems. Can you repeat that?
I
Can you
said,
hear me?
did you hear Egberto's question? Yes. Can you hear us?
I only
We
heard
can
the
hear you,
answers. I did
Victoria.
not.
Egberto, you want to ask her the question again since you
Okay,
threw it
what I
at
was
all of
saying
us?
is that I have a one of my folks on the internet that believed that Trump was sent to us by God, and you know, I just had to once she said that, there's not much else that one can say, right?
So what do you think, Victoria? And then we'll come back to the housing and homelessness.
So,
It's just Egberto's
well, I mean,
question
I
of the day.
think that if you're a believer, that's a perspective to see it as, because, you know, if you believe that God is in control of this universe, then you believe there's a reason. So as Robbie was just saying, Trump was voted in, whether you like him or not. And I think that we just have to address, I like looking backwards as much as I like looking forwards. And I like to see that, you know, if people are impacted by this negatively or positively, the most important thing is for people to understand, and your vote matters. And if you really care, you'll get out there and do something about it. And I think that's more effective and more impactful going forward than trying to analyze how, because everyone's going to see this as from a different perspective. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Egberto, thank you for joining us. You can find Egberto Willies at Politics Done Right Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Instagram, Periscope, YouTube, Twitter. This man is everywhere.
Wow.
We're all everywhere. Thank you, guys. Y'all have a wonderful day and see you around.
Thanks,
All right.
Egberto.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Berto.
Good morning, Victoria. Welcome to the broadcast. I know Angela has a broadcast that she has to hop on, her own broadcast, Friends of ADOS TV, in about 15 minutes.
No,
So
my dear, actually, my show.
Oh no, she went out again. She'll be
We
back.
lost
But Victoria, good morning. I know this
morning.
broadcast has been having some
Thank you for
issues. I think it's the internet this morning. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
I
You
can hear you.
me. I hope the audience can hear us. Let's bring Angela back. You're there, back, Angela?
Yes, my dear. I did my show at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so I can stay a few more minutes.
Oh, good. Well, welcome to the broadcast. Victoria is out in California, where you are, right, Victoria?
Ah.
And Victoria is you were a former real estate agent, Victoria, and you had a perspective on
currently
this
an
housing
active real estate agent in California. Offices in Glendale. I live in Pasadena, so home of the Rose Parade and Rose Bowl that everybody may have been watching over the New Year. But anyway, yeah, I'm here in California. He knows a little bit about the background of why she thought I might have some input on this issue, because A, I'm a realtor, and B, I've been impacted by the rent control issues via what we haven't really had rent control past the rent control law, but prior to that, there have been some issues, and I don't know how far you guys have addressed any of the homelessness, but I do think it contributes to the homelessness. People have been the main cause of homelessness out here is evictions, and coupled with hand in hand with lack. And so as a realtor, Robbie and I were talking about this earlier, I believe that I can practice real estate and not do harm to the community itself. Has become more of a way for people to make a real estate, or homes have become a way to make business, which has in turn done harm to the community, because they formed what we call LLCs, and they're protected. They expense what we call pass-through tax laws that make their tax responsibilities much less than a given corporation. And lots of people, as Robbie has, I don't know if she's talked about it in this broadcast, but we've talked about it in the past. She's making individual single-family residential homes into a business, and this is bringing a decrease to the inventory that we have for people that are shame.
So they're these flippers. Are they really flippers? These are the people that are coming into these communities, buying up these homes, like Robbie always talk about, for little or nothing, and then selling them or renting them out. Is that what you're talking about, Victoria?
Well, I don't know that that's really the issue, because if you're flipping houses and you're doing it on a smaller scale and you're doing it as an individual, your name's on title. But if you buy a home and you put your
That's not
home,
correct. Their
and
name's
it is
not
out here. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. They're not under LLCs?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, yeah. So if you buy a home for your own home, you're creating what we call an LLC, a limited liability partnership. Then you are getting under this umbrella where you are from tax laws that you're getting the benefits of a business or a corporation by way of writing off business expenses and so forth, and you're getting through tax laws with no responsibility that a corporation would have. You're basically only paying taxes as an individual, but you're getting the benefits. So it's just very complicated for the viewers who don't understand tax laws. But I really think that
you're talking fast. You got to understand you're educating us. Slow down, Victoria.
You're paying taxes as an
pieces.
Can
Okay.
I step in here?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is really important because Victoria is dead on, and she actually has a really important story. The conversation that we're entering here, it's really, really significant because we want to be very, very clear as to what the issues are so that we can be clear as to what the solutions are. Until we're clear on the issues, it's very difficult to get a concrete solution or solutions. So what Victoria has expressed is that we have a limited pool of inventory right now in housing, single family housing, apartments, whatever the case may be, specifically single family housing. What impacts inventory on single family housing? Cash investors, wholesalers, which are people operating in a broker capacity, agent capacity that are unlicensed. Agent investors, meaning people who have licenses like Victoria and I, who also operate in dual capacity and invest in properties, whether they're flips, rentals, whatever the case. Large corporations forming conglomerates, REITs, real estate investment trusts, buying up properties wholesale in blocks. Those are not being released to the general public. And then these LLCs, limited liability corporations, to Victoria's point, that do not place their name and they basically gobble up inventory, and they don't pay the appropriate tax revenue that they would as a business. What that all means, all those factors all together, and I negated to mention brokerages. Brokerages now and secondary platforms like Zillow, Trulia, Redfin are also purchasing properties. So we have, for example, companies.
So stop, because you got to understand you're talking to people who are not, we're not.
I'm getting somewhere.
Wait, I know, but let me make sure I understand where you are and the audience understands where you are.
Well,
so what you're
point, but go ahead.
Stay with me. So you're saying that, so these companies are coming around, buying up all of the inventory. So there's a shortage in inventory and housing across this country because these companies are starting to come in and buy up these houses for little or nothing.
Correct, but not correct. I don't want you to say companies because that's misleading to the public. The public needs to understand, the general public, the list of factors, the list of actors that we just went over, the LLCs, the brokerages, the agent investors, the wholesalers, the flippers, the conglomerates, all of these factors, all of these agents are buying up inventory. And these people operate with liquid or hard money, meaning they don't have to go through traditional lending, meaning they don't need 30 to 40 days for an inspection and appraisal. They don't jump through hoops for a bank. That means that the regular person, regular people cannot compete with these entities who can close in 3 to 5 days. So that when they gobble up inventory, whether they are buying to buy a book of business and create rentals, that's still impacting inventory, and they're not going to rent for on the low. Their whole purpose is to generate income. So they're going to rent on the high. So that's why I kind of wanted to step in with Victoria, because whoever it is still commoditizing the single family residential market, not paying fair tax revenue, impacting inventory, which impacts affordability, homelessness, revenue to everyone, a housing first model.
Right.
So as taxpayers, when we allow that, when we allow the non-regulation of the housing market, we now pay to subsidize affordable housing complexes. Developers who have lots of money, we pay to subsidize. We pay for a homeless epidemic. We pay for down payment assistance in the form of federal programs. So we have to understand who the players are, what the impact is, and how it costs us. And to your point, that it costs some people way more than others. And that is predominantly people of low income, predominantly people of color, predominantly the ADOS movement are impacted the worst, to your point with the stats. But that is in a nutshell. But Victoria has a fascinating story because she is an agent. She lives on the West Coast, and her building, because of the rent control, everyone's getting evicted. So the solution that the elected officials presented created her to be in a situation as an agent in a building paying her rent to be evicted. And she's had very fascinating experiences with these elected officials, which I hope she can chat about.
How
Victoria.
does being in a rent-controlled building?
What I did was I'm sorry, somebody was asking a question. What was that?
Yes, I thank you, Rabia, for that explanation. Powerful. Victoria, how does being in a rent-controlled building cause people to get evicted? I don't understand.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So we didn't have rent control. So before this California, what prompted all of this was California has been never controlled at all. Whatever laws were on the books were not being enforced. And when I went to the city officials, when I first got a 60-day notice because my building was sold, and I was being told that the people that were buying it because they wanted to raise the rents, because most of the tenants who had been here many, many years, 15, their rents had not been what they would consider market rent value. So the new buyers, while in escrow, asked that when they purchase the building, when they closed escrow, they don't have to worry about us old tenants and try to raise our rents really high. They can just get us out and then rent them to people who would then be paying what they consider market price. Market price on a 2-bedroom apartment, which is what I live in California, $2,000. Okay, so I've been paying $825 and getting a real estate discount of $3. They only pay $5, which is crazy. That's probably that's probably average rent for somewhere in Arkansas or something. But in California, that's unheard of. So they sent us a 60-day notice. Said Pasadena has no appetite for rent control. But they knew that AB 1482 on the pike in January of 2020. So there was this rush from landlords to get old tenants out that were paying too low. AB 1482 is now a rent control law. It's a rent control law that limits increases 5% plus a 3 or whatever the CPI index is for cost of living. Right now it's 3.1, I believe, here. So you cannot raise the rents now that it's January of 2020. That law is in effect. And what they were trying to do is beat the clock on that, because if you're still in your unit by January, you're basically under laws. So we went to the city. I joined with a bunch of people at the Pasadena Tenants Union, which I didn't even know existed until this happened to me. I went to City Hall, and we fought for 2 weeks straight at the City Hall meetings in I wrote to my council member in my their districts, and we actually were able to pass what they called an eviction moratorium. So my city, who didn't have an appetite for rent control before, an election coming up. So I'm quite sure this was very important to the elected officials to try to comply with what we were requesting, because we vote. And Pasadena is comprised of 60% renters. So they actually passed an eviction moratorium. So they basically adopted the 1482 laws before the January 2020 breakout date. And that basically put a null and void, if you will, on all of these 60-day notices. You're supposed to put a reason. If you have a good reason, you can still evict people as a landlord because it's your property. But they basically just said they wanted us out, and they didn't put a reason in there. Fault evictions, because there was no reason. There's no fault at there. And that's why they were trying to beat the clock on this. So now that January is here, the people that are still in their units, like myself, are protected by this rent increase. But these investors, my new landlord is an LLC. He buys multiple properties around Southern California, and he has lots of cash. So he can actually decide, if he doesn't want to comply with these laws, decide to get us out. He can just start the process over, give us a 60-day notice, and say he wants to do substantial renovations, and legally he can do that and get us out. But I don't know what's going to happen right now. We're just in limbo.
I think this is a really important example of elected officials putting in policy without local experts or the industry not discussing the reality of what's occurring, not being regulated, and how it can actually make it worse. And Victoria, in this situation, I'm grateful that she's speaking out, because what a lot of people don't know is that realtors actually have a code of ethics, and they're really not allowed, they're bound to this code of ethics and not allowed to speak about other realtors or the industry in a negative light, which kind of protects the system. It's very problematic. And Victoria's experience with the elected officials has been one that they are claiming to care about these issues, but in action, their actions have not, and I've had a similar experience, their actions are not congruent with their claims. And so when we look at this example, what we can learn from it is to make sure that the industries are transparent, that the public is aware, that people are not punished for speaking about it, coming forward, and that the elected officials work in conjunction with local experts to get solutions that are not going to make it worse. And then on top of it, Victoria is actually in a position where she's aligned herself with people who are stable. Imagine if these were lower working income class people who could not do that, who could not make the time because they were working late, who did not have the resources that this tenants union has created with alliance and alliance. So, and again, if people think that this doesn't impact you in general, please know that as a taxpayer, whatever you are working for, whatever you are spending your life energy on, your money will either pay to subsidize not real solutions or pay to get to the empowerment to get real solutions. And the real solutions are a fraction of what our lack of preventative action costs later down the line. And that's monetarily, but also to your neighbors, to your friends, to your elders, to your allies. And really, whether you're light skin, dark skin, black, white, Puerto Rican, whatever, you have a stake in this. You know, some of your stake is bigger or not, but either way, we're not immune. If you're driving around and you don't want to be carjacked, and someone, let's be real about it. People who carjack, steal, break into houses, prostitute, sell drugs, their goal is to make money. So I'm sorry, the lady just left. Her point of people having access to jobs it's a massive point, because they're trying to live, they're trying to survive, and it's all tied together. The access to jobs, the housing, the policy, the transparency, the collective bargaining, it's all tied together.
You're right.
Thank you. Great minds think alike.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I did want to add to what you said, Rabia, that, you know, the people that can't afford the fight that Victoria and her collective were able to fight are amongst the working homeless now, because they can't afford to fight. They can't afford to take time off from work for this fight. They are literally sleeping in their cars, or on Skid Row, or in somebody's homeless shelter. That's where they end up. They don't live another day to fight. And this is just okay. So let me ask you this, Victoria. Even with the moratorium,
we're at the top of the hour, Angela. we're at the top. Yes, this was a full broadcast. We are definitely going to do this again.
Can you put me in touch with Victoria?
Absolutely, I will. Absolutely, I will. Robbie, thank you for inviting Victoria. Victoria, it is so nice to meet you. Thank you for being an advocate. Thank you for being a voice to the housing and homelessness crisis out in California. Robbie, thank you for all the work you do right here in Georgia and right there in the ATL. You can find Miss Angela Nirvana right here on Facebook at Friends of ADOS TV. She does a broadcast that is on fire. So please check out Angela Nirvana. You can find Miss Robbie Caban at the NPU Resident Public Forum. I am Tamara Johnson Shealey. Thank you, Victoria. We look forward to having you back and getting your perspective on what's going on out in California. I am Tamara Johnson Shealey, candidate for the United States Senate, making sure that I listen and hear these conversations because we have a bold agenda to take to Washington. So I'm here taking notes. Again, I am Tamara Johnson Shealey. Mr. David will be back on next week. He played hooky today, so he'll be back on next week. Angela, thank you for sitting in on his behalf. Robbie, I'll see you soon. Victoria, you have a great one. And thank you guys for joining us on this broadcast. See you next Saturday right here at 11 o'clock Eastern.